Hi friends, Ryan Hembree here, and today's video documents several important archaeological discoveries related to the writing on the wall story in Daniel chapter 5. And really, this is part 2 because in a previous video I already talked at length about one of these artifacts known as the Cylinder of Nabonidus, and I'll put a link to that video up in the cards at the end. But in this video, I'm going to show you even more archaeological discoveries that not only help to substantiate this biblical story, but also add to our understanding of it. So let's get to it. In Daniel chapter 5, Belshazzar, the very last Babylonian king, foolishly mocks Yahweh at a large public feast by using the gold and silver vessels acquired from God's temple in Jerusalem as wine goblets while praising the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. But his irreverence was interrupted when the fingers of a human hand suddenly appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. Of course, this instantly put the fear of God into this reckless royal, who immediately called in his best wise men, promising that whoever reads this writing and shows its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be third ruler in the kingdom. But none of these so-called wise men could even read, let alone interpret the writing. Only God's prophet Daniel could decipher this mysterious code. Belshazzar had been weighed and measured and found lacking, and so his kingdom would be divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And so it was, that very night, Belshazzar the king was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom. Now, while skeptics would have us believe that this story is nothing more than a Sunday school fantasy, archaeological evidence shows otherwise. For example, although Belshazzar was unknown to secular history, in 1854 his name was discovered in Ur, inscribed into 4 identical cylinders made by his father, King Nabonidus. But the cylinders of Nabonidus aren't the only artifacts that help to substantiate this biblical account. As archaeologist Dr. Titus Kennedy writes in his book Unearthing the Bible, another cuneiform text called the verse account of Nabonidus, found at Babylon, states that Nabonidus left Babylon on a long journey and entrusted the kingship to his firstborn son, whose identity as Belshazzar is known from the cylinders. Nabonidus was the final Babylonian king until the Persians conquered Babylon in roughly 539 BC, and yet he had little interest in ruling from Babylon or managing typical affairs of the state. In fact, the Nabonidus Chronicle states several times that King Nabonidus was not in Babylon, but the prince Belshazzar was there. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Xenophon in Cyropedia wrote that the son of a Babylonian king, also called the king, was ruling in Babylon when the Persians conquered the city. Now, combining the evidence from these Babylonian documents illuminates the circumstances surrounding the reign of Nabonidus, including his departure from the capital and his appointment of his firstborn son, Belshazzar, as co-regent to rule as king in Babylon. So as Kennedy goes on to explain, these documents not only confirm the existence of Belshazzar and his position as king of Babylon until the Persians captured the city, but the text explains why Belshazzar would only be able to grant third place in the kingdom to anyone who interpreted the handwriting on the wall, since his father Nabonidus was first in the kingdom and Belshazzar was second. Well, these discoveries are a powerful testimony to the historical reliability and truthfulness of Daniel's account, even to the smallest details regarding political matters in 6th century Babylon. Some unbelievers still persist in their unbelief because they think Daniel made a couple of big errors regarding Belshazzar. For one thing, Daniel refers to Belshazzar as the king when in fact he was the prince. Also, Daniel says several times that Nebuchadnezzar was his father, when in fact his father was Nabonidus. But remember what Xenophon told us. Even though Belshazzar was technically the prince, he was also called a king since his father all but abdicated the throne and gave the kingship to his son. So the Bible is accurate when it identifies Belshazzar as the king. And as for Belshazzar's relationship to Nebuchadnezzar, we know that Nebuchadnezzar was not his father. As a matter of fact, says Bible scholar Boyd Sievers, Belshazzar may not have even been a blood relative to Nebuchadnezzar at all, but as Sievers goes on to explain, the author of Daniel may be using father in the sense of father and son as dynastic predecessor and successor. And one sees this when the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III of Assyria describes the Israelite king Jehu as the son of Omri. Now, of course, Jehu and Omri had no blood relation. Jehu was simply Omri's later successor. And in this sense, Nebuchadnezzar was Belshazzar's father as his predecessor on the Babylonian throne. Additionally, father and son can also be used of ancestor and later descendant, as Jesus was a son of David. And though it's far from certain, Belshazzar may have even been Nebuchadnezzar's descendant. And it's unclear how Belshazzar's father Nabonidus secured the Babylonian throne, since he wasn't a son of Nebuchadnezzar. But if he married a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar as Nigrilassar, who was the second king after Nebuchadnezzar had done, Belshazzar would have been a grandson of Nebuchadnezzar. So if this connection is correct, Nebuchadnezzar would have been Belshazzar's father as both predecessor and ancestor. So Daniel makes absolutely no mistakes and truly is a reliable historical account. The writing, as they say, is on the wall. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to watch part 1, which goes into more detail about the cylinder of Nabonidus, just click on the card. And as I mentioned before, the Nabonidus cylinder confirms that King Belshazzar was indeed a real person. And not only that, but it also confirms that Belshazzar was who the Bible says he was.